Jamie LaRue for coming.
So this is the way my brain works, and I'm going to kind of go around this mind map at the 1 o'clock position. I have at this point worked as a volunteer library director in Arizona. I've worked as a circulation clerk in Normal, Illinois, the most misnamed town in America. I have worked as a municipal library director in Greeley, Greeley, Colorado. I've worked as a county librarian and a district librarian, so that's the work side. I've also been on many boards. So I've worked on a charter school board that I co-founded. I have worked on a community theater board, worked on the Economic Development Council board, and I believe, and the reason that I've been called to speak to you is that I believe I have seen both sides of this, every kind of board position. I've worked 4 boards. And I'm pretty sure I have made every mistake that it's possible to make in all of those positions. And so since January of 2014, I've been traveling around the country, talking to a lot of libraries, talking to a lot of library directors, and I think that this issue, the relationship between the library director and the library board, may be the most important thing for us to be talking about. That this is the area that when it's successful, it is spectacular. And when it's bad, it is very bad. Okay? So what I want to start with is something that I often do as an exercise when I first meet a board. I'll go up to them and I'll say, let's get to know each other. Let's just kind of go around the table and you tell me the passion that brought you to the table. Why are you here? Library boards, probably not the money, probably not the glory, right? There's something that happened in your life that made this important to you. And often it's like, if I probe a little bit, everybody comes back to, there was a moment when a librarian saved my life. There was a moment when I suddenly got connected to things. There was a moment when I thought I was alone, but I got connected to stories and other people. A good friend of mine is a wonderful storyteller. And when she was 8 years old, she found a book in the library about African stories. Thrilled. When she got old enough, she went to Kenya, she studied all of these stories, and she became one of the 3 best storytellers in America. And she tells African storytelling. She loves African tales. But it turned out that she was Irish. You know, and somebody said, well, you're supposed to be telling Irish stories. She's like, I don't like Irish stories. Those aren't the stories that speak to me. And so you find your people, you find your stories at the library. That's where you first come alive. And so I urge you all to remember, when you disagree with each other, when you're not quite sure what you're supposed to be there to talk about, remember that it was passion that brought you there. It's love that brought you to the library. It wasn't money. It wasn't glory. Okay, second thing is I'll talk about communication. I'll come back to talk about what kind of board you are. I'll urge you to think about how you spend your time as a board, and then we'll talk about the importance of evaluation. And up there at the top, that's how you find me. You are now all my friends. So if you have questions that you want to follow up about this stuff, just call me. Okay. How many of you are elected boards? Okay. And how many of you are self-perpetuating boards? Okay. And how many of you are appointed by some other body? Nobody. Okay. In Colorado, all right, 2 over here. In Colorado, we were an independent library board and independent library district, but our board is appointed by the county. And so what that meant, when a board position would come out, I would write a newspaper column. I was a columnist for 25 years, and I would say, here's what we're looking for. These are the skills. These are the issues. If you're interested, apply. Send us a letter of interest. Send us your resume. And the last time I did that, I got 12 people who wanted to be on the library board. Okay? An embarrassment of riches, right? And so I started using a technique that I love, and I recommend this to you when you get around to the point where you might be wanting to replace a library director. A powerful, powerful strategy to figure out just how good somebody's going to be on the board. We brought in 6 of them at a time. In the audience, we had the other board members and members of the public and the library director. And we said, these are 4 questions that we're really trying to figure out. That issues that really happen. And we want you to take 1 minute to say, here's my life, I was born here, I did this kind of work, I'm interested in the library for this reason, 1 minute resume. And then we want you to talk to each other as if it's a board meeting. So this issue is coming up, we want you to talk to each other. Beforehand, I've talked to everybody who's out in the audience, and I say, you may never have thought about this, but here's how I determine whether or not you're going to be a good board member. Here's how I figure out if you're going to be a good library director. And it's all communication behavior. And it's so simple. It's so obvious. It's so observable. There are only 4 things that you do in a board meeting. One of them is, it's your voice. Do you talk loud? Are you quiet? Do you talk quickly? Do you speak slowly? Do you articulate the words? Do you have a tendency to kind of slur things? And it's all these kind of variations of voice. And I point this out because we make judgments about each other so quickly on the basis of this communication behavior. But we often don't stop and figure out how we got there. An example, I was helping a Chamber of Commerce decide who their new director was going to be, and I did this panel, all 7 of the candidates up there at the same time. And when it was over, I said, okay, so help me evaluate each of these people that was speaking. And this one guy said, well, we can't hire her, she was timid. And I said, what made you conclude she was timid? Well, she just had no backbone. What behavior did she evidence that made you conclude that she had no backbone? Well, her voice was quiet. She disagreed with the mayor 8 times. She was not spineless. The woman had a backbone of titanium. She was soft-spoken. And often we make the wrong conclusions about people that we made this quick little judgment on the basis of this communication behavior. So I say to somebody, as they're speaking, write down their voice. They speak quickly. There is warmth in their voice. They speak softly. Not because it says they're timid, but because it helps you be precise about how they communicate. Second thing, nonverbal. 85% of our communication is nonverbal. Experiments have been done about this where, say, I'm doing your annual evaluation. I say, yeah, Maja, you really did a bad job this year. Not very happy with it, and hope I see some improvement. As opposed to, you did a really good job. And I'm going to give you a raise because that's what we were looking for. And what happened was this person walked out of that meeting depressed and angry. And this person, even though she got bad news, says, it wasn't that bad. Because you're reading the cues that are not the words, right? You're reading the behavior, the communication behavior. Third thing is process management. When I give people, these are 4 things we're going to talk about in 15 minutes, it's like a board meeting, right? You've got an agenda, you've got things you're supposed to get through, and there are people who sit there and say, you know what, we only have 10 minutes and there's 3 items, let's move on, right? That's process management. An issue comes up, you say, what do we think about this? Someone is the first to speak. So I say, when you're watching them, write down who's the first to speak, and who also does something that's wonderful process management. They lean over and say, so Peter, what you were saying was this, and they summarize as they go along. Good communication behavior. What does it mean? It means you're paying attention to each other, right? That's what good communication behavior looks like. And finally, every time I do this kind of panel discussion where we watch people, they say, well, it's all about what they say, right? It's like, I don't care what you say. Because anyone who is an intelligent human being should be changing their mind fairly frequently. As new information is made available to you, as you think about things, as you learn, you start talking and thinking about things in a different way, right? So I don't care what you say. What matters to me, what matters to communication is how you say it. And so if I can walk into a room and see that everybody sitting around the table is looking and smiling and nodding and reaching over to, kind of reassure somebody with a touch, that's good communication. The greatest single breakdown, if you have a dysfunctional board, and everybody here has had that moment, right? It's because this stuff wasn't happening. You were disrespecting each other by not making eye contact, by shaking your head as they were speaking, by closing down your body, by not having the courtesy to look to somebody and say, oh, I like that point that you made. Okay? If you are communicating well, you are syncing each other up. And why are you on the board? To make good decisions. That's the purpose of it. The reason that the director brings you a question, the board talks about it, and they are trying honestly, or should be trying, to get it, right? To understand each other, to say, okay, if you disagree, let's talk about that so we can understand and make a good decision. Communication behavior is the best predictor of success in every position in the library. You're a children's librarian and the child walks in, if your face lights up. I was 6 years old, stepped onto the bookmobile in Waukegan, Illinois. Mrs. Johnson, who had a little, bangs and the cat's eye glasses and a bun in the back, she turned and smiled at me as if I was the man she had been waiting for all of her life. Right? I fell in love with libraries at that moment. Right? In the moment, communication behavior. That's the part that works. So the other part that fascinates me is like when you talk about how do you recruit somebody to the board, how do you evaluate your own performance, how do you hire a library director. Too often we do these interview kinds of situations. And here's what the research tells us. The typical interview situation. I'm very interested in you as an applicant. I want you to come in. We're going to have 3 or 4 or 5 people. We're going to ask you a bunch of questions. So where do you see yourself in 5 years? Tell me about your weaknesses. Okay? That whole process has been proved emphatically not to work. Right? There are some people who can BS their way through an interview. They look great. You hire them, you put them on the board, they sit down and they suck. Like they're poor communicators. And so what you need to do for any position, any job, and a board is a job, put them in a spot where they have to demonstrate the behavior that's what the job is about. Hiring a children's storyteller and you want them to tell stories, the interview is the story that they tell to the children. Right? If you're on a board, what's the interview? How well do you listen to each other? So I loved when we would do this exercise with board members who would come up and put them up there. You say, okay, well, what would an issue would come up and someone would launch into some outrageous thing and make everybody else shut up and you go, thank you, there's no way we want you on the board. Right? Because good board behavior is so clear. It's courtesy. It is attention to each other. The skills I've already talked about, and I want to talk about all the things, and I will try to be even-handed. And if I'm not, I want you to remind me that I'm not being. Here's when I had been hired by the Douglas County Libraries, very, very bad library, said, run a library, or run a campaign. I ran the campaign, we won. We got all of this money, we broke away, we were building new buildings, everything was great. And I walked confidently into my annual evaluation. And a quick question, how many of you annually evaluate your director? How many of you do not? How many of you are just lying right now? Okay. It's important to evaluate the director and to evaluate yourself, and I'll come back to that. But I walked into my evaluation saying, okay, feeling good. I've done some remarkable things. And my board president said, Jamie, I just can't give you a good evaluation. And I said, really, why? And he said, because you didn't build up our audio book collection. Fair? And I said, well, if that matters to you, then you need to tell me before I start working on the year. You can't withhold the secret decision about my performance and say, you didn't guess it. Right? You can't surprise me. I can walk into, the next year and I can get more audiobooks now that I know that you want it. Okay? So the whole point is, if you're going to judge me on my behavior, tell me what you're judging me on. Give me a shot at trying to figure out a way to do that. Okay? Don't surprise me. Give the director a heads up. Clear communication of expectations. Judge them on what they did, not on what you secretly wanted them to do. The other side. Good library directors. Heck, I've even done it myself. I would walk into a board meeting and I would say, here's a contract. It was due yesterday. It's for $35,000. Could you please sign it? And my board would say, is this a significant contract? You'd say, yeah, it's absolutely essential. And they'd say, you didn't know it was coming up? Yeah. Then give us the contract so we have a chance to think about it. Let us know that it's coming. Because if you surprise us with a sudden economic requirement, a fiscal requirement, and we don't know about it, it makes us look uninformed and it makes you look unprepared. Fair enough? Absolutely fair. So, okay, if I want you to look good, if the director wants to make the board look successful, then they're prepped. So we have to let you know what's up, what's coming. And then it was funny, for a while when our library was very, very small, and I'm sure this is true for many of you, I was not only supposed to do the director's report and answer any board questions, I also had to take the minutes, right? You know, while I'm running the meeting. And so I'm trying to take very comprehensive meetings and typing everything up as we go along. And after it's over, I would hand it to my the board secretary, who would review it and make line comments in green ink. She used green ink. And the first time I handed her the minutes, she says, can we go out for coffee? I said, sure. And she says, you know, here's the problem. You did a really remarkably accurate job of summing up the things we talked about. And when I said, well, what about this, which was a stupid question, you absolutely captured that question and assigned it to me, which was accurate. But I'm asking you in the future, don't do that. Make us look smart. Because the minutes wind up being the official record of an institution, right? And many of us now put the minutes on the board, on the website. And so somebody comes in, they say, I'm thinking about being on the board, and they look at the board minutes and they go, God, these people are idiots. Or an intelligent discussion ensued where people ask this question, they ask question, and you summarize the intelligent decision. Minutes are the official record of the board, and they present the reputation of the organization to the community. So she said, so be generous. Summarize the good things that we did, and when we reach a decision, summarize the decision. Reasonable, right? And so your job as the director, your job as the person who's recording the discussion, is to make the board look good. This is a community decision-making process. And when people ask dumb questions, not so dumb, an important thing. You can say, we asked questions about the length of the contract, a number of, or my favorite, 2 words, discussion ensued. A decision was reached, okay? You don't have to capture everything. Make the board look smart. This is something that I find really interesting, is that many times boards don't know what kind of board they are. So how many of you have ever been on a Rotary board or Civitan or, quilting club or some little tiny board? I'm sure many of you have. What it comes down to, there's no staff, right? I was on a Rotary board. I was the president of the board created in the year 2000. We ran a beer booth at Oktoberfest. You're on the board, you rent the truck, you rent the tables, you set up the tables, you get the beer, you check the IDs, you serve the beer, you stay to clean everything up. You do all that because there is no staff, right? The board is the staff. There's nobody to delegate it to. And there are many people who wind up being on a library board, and this is their only board experience. And so they think, my job is to do everything. That is incorrect. It depends upon what kind of board you are. Very, very small, you might well be. Civic, you're a startup board. When we first converted to a library district, everything had to be done from scratch. We had to have a new policy manual, we had to have insurance, we had to have all this stuff, and we were having board meetings once a week, and the board was making very close operational decisions. Useful, needed to do it, we were in a startup mode, And at some point, we were done with that stuff, and I had to say, thank you so much for your help, Cindy. Move back. We're done with that phase. We don't need that anymore. Second phase is the advisory board, and this is kind of around the country for a long time. A library board would often be in a city charter. It would say, it's an independent board, and you hire and fire the director, you assign the money. And then as cities got larger and libraries started losing money, the director reported to the mayor directly. There was no board. Or then they reported to the assistant mayor. And then they reported to the head of Parks and Recreation. And then they reported to the assistant director of the Parks, moving down. And at that point, there might still be a board, but it was no longer a governing board. It was an advisory board. What does an advisory board do? Some important functions. I might say, I'm thinking about adopting a new policy. Is this a good idea? You think this will irritate everybody in the communities? What do you think? I just want to get some feedback. It might be connections. We're thinking about launching a maker station. We need somebody that has a 3D printer. Your brother is the head of the Costco, or your brother's the head of Best Buy, and they have 3D printers on sale. Can you get one for me? Or it's like, okay, I go in, I report directly to the head of the Department of Culture, and I have to ask for my budget from the town council. If I go in and ask for it, they're going to say, oh yeah, you're just asking for money to put in your own pocket. But if I can find somebody who is a local businessman who believes in the library and they speak on my behalf, the community is asking for it and I'm going to get more money. So that's advocacy. That's where an advisory board goes in and speaks for you because you can't speak for yourself. This is the fundraising board. Any of you have foundations? Okay. Often what a foundation is, we say, you are wealthy, or you know people who are wealthy, and welcome to our board, and your job is to raise $10,000 a year. Okay? I've never been on a board like that. Maybe you have. But often boards are like this. That's the job. Your job is who you know and how much money you have, and you're supposed to raise money. This one is the one where I think the rubber hits the road. This is the governing board, and I suspect most of you are like this, right? You adopt a budget. Yes? You overview a monthly financial statement. Okay? You supervise the director. We used to say hire and fire, but I've tried to be more gentle about this. It's you choose a director, you try to give them some advice, you want them to be successful, but you are the employer of the director. And then the two things too often forgotten by boards is that your job is organizational effectiveness. Is your library any good? And we'll talk later about ways to determine that. But that's your job. You're supposed to say, are we a good library? And if we're not, we should be getting better. And the last one is, where are we going? A director may well come in and pitch, here's the future of the library, but it's your job to say, this is a good fit for our community. Here's where we're going. There's the direction. So planning is your job. And then sometimes there are weird hybrid libraries where they have pieces of some different things. But I really call this out to say a governing board is the highest of all of this hierarchy. This is where the whole responsibility for the civic organization is in your hands. Okay, this lovely picture. I'm going to kind of go through and say there are 4 quadrants: task, management, leadership, governance. That's what goes on in any library. Some of this might happen, and I recognize there may be one-person libraries in the room. Like say, yeah, I do that, I do that, I do that, I do that. But generally speaking, all these things happen within a library. And the first one, and I'll talk about both a focus and time and a function. So in every library, the primary thing is task. Somebody walks in, they say, I'm looking for a book on, Barbie dolls. And in the moment, someone says, I'm going to find you a book on Barbie dolls. And they do, and it's wonderful service. And the focus is the moment, and the function is good service, right? That's what you want, right? That's the transaction that Brian was talking about. You want good service, responsive, quick, friendly, knowledgeable, okay? That's frontline staff, right? That's not the board, probably. It's frontline staff. Second one is management. And here the responsibility is, now I'm thinking about the week. So if I have more than 2 employees, somebody has to do the schedule, right? So here's who's here from 9 to 5, and who's here from 3 to 8, and all that scheduling and coordination. I'm looking at an annual budget. I'm looking at a monthly calendar. I have a longer time frame that's typically never longer than a year. What's my job? Coordination. Are all of the positions filled? Can we open up the library because somebody's here? So that's management. That's like mid-management, department head or whatever. And then you move into leadership. And a good friend of mine, former board president, now kind of a corporate buddy of mine, we have this argument. He said, who's responsible for vision? He said, director. I said, board. And I think I've decided he's right. Because what he says is that you're the one who's gone to school, you're the one who's paid to think about this, you're the one who's talking to other people, you're going to come back with your best ideas. And the vision, the time period, is 3 to 5 years. It's not this year. It's like, what's going to happen? What are the trends? What are the challenges? What might fundamentally change the way we do business? Because a crisis is a failure of management, right? You didn't see it coming. So the job of the director is to see what's coming and come back and say, you know what? I think I've identified that there are 3 or 4 things here. Now there's a weird thing in America where we believe that you are born with vision. It's genetic, right? I don't believe that. It's not like, some people have it and some people don't. Here's how you get to vision. I'm the library director. I go up and I say to every one of my board members, what do you think the most important thing that our community is facing? What do you think? What do you think? You're a library staff member. What's the most important thing you're working on and why? What's the most important thing you're working on? Leadership begins with listening. It begins with questions. It begins with, tell me what's important. And then after I hear all that stuff, I come back and I say, so last time you said this, is that right? Did I get it right? And you go, no, I didn't say that. And you go, okay, what did you say? I go through iteration after iteration to say, did I get it right? Did I distill it? Do I understand what people are telling me? And at some point I'm going to say, okay, so here's the story. Is that right? This is the stuff that we collectively think matters. This is what's important. And you go, that's it. And you go, guess what? That's our vision. That's our vision. That's what we're going to work on. These are the things that matter. This is how we're going to make things better. And then I pitch that to the board. It's the job of the director. And then you get to trustee job. Your job is governance. And governance means a lot of things. So what is the time frame that you think of? And I'm going to say it's a generation. It's not a year. It's not 5 years. How many of you have ever had to build a new library? A library lasts 50 years. It's a generation. How many of you still remember the funny thing that we do about stereotypes of library? I have the bun and I say, shh. Okay? Right. Yeah, and I'm so glad you cut that bun off. Bottom line about this one is that idea of a librarian lasts a generation. I grew up with that. I was shushed. I didn't like it. I became a librarian. We didn't shush people anymore. Right? The librarian, the image of librarianship has changed. We have more people in our libraries. It's noisier because more people are there. Right? And so this idea is that you are the keeper of the reputation of the library in the community. And so when the library director comes up and says, my vision of the future is that, the maker station idea, we're a place where not just consuming culture, we create culture. And the board goes, interesting. I buy it. Your call. We pitch. You call. You decide whether or not that's what our future is. And then ultimately, you're the one who's accountable. And that's the wonderful thing about being a library director. You can be so wacky because you're not really responsible. The library board is the one that at some point says, we're accountable to our community. Yes, we like this idea. We invested in it. We built a new library. It's going to last 50 years, and this represents our best vision for the future of libraries, and it's a good fit for our community. So where do things go wrong? And things do go wrong. The biggest problem that I hear as I travel around the country is from top left to top right. And here's one of the questions I say. You're in a grocery store, walking through, and someone comes up and they say, last night I was talking to Kathy at the children's department and she treated my son so mean. Let me give you a range of options. The library board member says, I'm going to talk to Kathy. That's the wrong call, okay? That's where things go wrong. That's where the governing body, the individual, says, I'm going to go over and start doing management. Not your job. You as a board have one employee, the library director. Everybody else works for the library director. What's the responsibility of the governing body? You say, I will pass that on to the director and I'll let you know what happened. And so then the board person says to the president, heard about this problem, look into it and let me know that it's resolved. Okay? Board president's going to hold the director accountable. Heard about a problem, what did you do about it? But they're not going to try to solve the problem, right? That's, and I want to, see, is this the place to talk about it? Yes, it's the place to talk about it. I had a wonderful volunteer, worked at the library. Her name happened to be Kathy. She was a high-powered attorney, and she loved to work at the book sale. And so she would come in and she would, love this and enjoy talking to all the staff. And after a while, she says, love what we're doing. I want to bring a grant from my employer to buy a storage facility for some of our used books, $20,000. Walks in and gives that to the board like that. Had a board position to open up. They hired Kathy and brought her in. And at her first board meeting, they said, well, welcome, Kathy, to our board. And she says, I just want to say, there's a problem at one of our libraries. I prefer not to go into details right now. So I said, okay, gotcha. Walked up to Kathy and said, can I take you out to lunch and tell me what the problem is? She said, well, one of your employees has a significant issue with the management of that branch, and I promised her I would protect her anonymity. I said, can you tell me any more about that? I'm not going to try to punish her. She said, no, I promised her anonymity. I went, okay. So I went to my branch manager and I said, heard about this problem, can you dig into it? She comes back and says, Jamie, I think everybody's happy. Can't find a problem. I walk into this, so I call Kathy and I say, I'm not hearing that there's a problem. Can you give me any information? And she said, no, I can't. And then went to the next board meeting and she said, all I can say is that the problem at this branch is getting worse. So I took her out to lunch again and I said, here's the problem. You have a member of the staff who complained to you and they thought they were communicating something that needed to be fixed. I told the board member, but you won't tell me what it is. I can't fix it. Meanwhile, the person on the staff, because they told you, didn't tell their supervisor. The supervisor doesn't know. This isn't helping. This is making things worse. I don't need your assistance to manage the library. You can say to her, in fact, go back to this employee and say, tell the manager and I'll make sure that you're not punished for raising a problem. That's fair. But at this point, all you're doing is making things worse. She came back to the next morning, it's even getting worse, she says. So I said to my board president, can you do something with that? They took her out to lunch and said, this makes us all look bad. What's the problem? Well, I promised I would reveal her, okay? Then she took it to we had our annual meeting, the whole board was out there, and she said, well, I can't say anything. And they were like, then shut up. Say something or shut up. And she was, no, it's, but I'm going to make sure I'm going to keep talking about it until it's fixed. Right? And so then my board president did something so clever. He says, I'm turned out, I'm about to be done, and I want to suggest to the board that we don't have automatic renewal, self-appointed board. He says, from now on, I want all of the rest of you to evaluate my performance. And so let's talk about what we really expect of a library board member. You show up prepared, you've read the packet, you don't miss meetings, you are engaged and polite and communicate to people, you speak well, you have read library law, you have attended various continuing education meetings, and you respect the chain of command. So Kathy is watching this. Board president wants to be evaluated by everybody else, and realized that she wasn't going to make that, and she resigned. And I mention all of this to say, what a roundabout way. Here's somebody who just wanted all the focus to be about her, who didn't help the library, was very corrosive. Library directors don't need your help to run the library. They need your help to figure out if they're going in the right direction, to represent the larger community. And what I particularly liked about this was, over the course of this, my board united, they defined a new kind of set of expectations of each other, they defined a new culture, and they were united against a common enemy who wasn't me. Right? And so it's funny is that sometimes a dysfunctional board member helps everybody else to say, oh God, we don't want to be like that. So my question to you as board members is, so what kind of culture do you want to have? And the culture is, we respect each other. We respect the chain of command. We hold ourselves to high standards. And we expect our director to take care of problems and come back and tell us whether or not they did. Evaluation. One of the most important things you do annually at least is first you evaluate the director. And I did talk about this once before, and you can find this link, and I think you've already got this one, right, because it's on this laptop. People try to evaluate directors according to 3 ways. One of them is traits. They go, your hair is funny, and you dress weird, and you show up late. And often, you see people that are doing this kind of performance evaluation. It's like, we kind of don't like something about you, and we want you to change that. Very common. The second one is that we put a list of stuff that we wanted you to do. Go to this meeting, define an organization chart, do all these things. We'll say you did it or you didn't do it, and that's a little better. But here's the best evaluation. You say, as a trustee, this is what we want to do as a library, and we want to increase the number of children in our school system that have library cards. Right now it's 12%, we want you to get to 15 to 20. Okay, that's a goal. And then you say to the director, how that happens is up to you. Here's what happens, but how it happens is up to you. That's what it means to be a director. Okay? Now what you're doing is you're holding the director accountable for the progress of the institution, for the forward movement of the library. That's a good evaluation. And if the director doesn't do that, you say, you are not the right director for us, or you need a little bit of help to make this happen. But now you have something to talk about, the success of the library. The other thing that I'm going to say that most library boards do not do is that, it's so funny, my board got into this conversation one time where they were trying to figure out, should we have term limits? Because some of them have been on the board for 12 years. And a new board member said, yes, absolutely. I don't even care what they are, but we need to have term limits. And some of my board members said, well, I've been on for 12 years, and if somebody new comes on, they should be able to be on for 12 years, and what applies to them applies to us, so I should be on for 24 years, and and on it went. And they said to me finally, they said, Jamie, what do you think about term limits? And I said, it's totally the wrong question. I said, so suppose I were to say, here's how we handle staff. We don't advertise for the position. We don't say what skills they want. We don't interview. They show up one day. We don't train them. There's no mentoring. There's no annual evaluation. And after 12 years, we fire them. So that's crazy. That's how we run the board. If staff is an asset to the organization, and they are, right? The reputation is the staff. Is the board an asset of the library? Does it deserve professional management? And that means that you as a board could sit down every year and say, how good are we? Have we figured out what we should be doing? We as an asset of the board. Have we identified continuing education that we need? Have we set aside money in the budget to make us better? Because you're an asset of the board. You're an asset of the organization. And if someone else isn't managing you, it's up to you. The best boards in the country annually sit down and say, we hold ourselves to the highest standards. better standards than any organization in the country. Why do we do that? Because we want to be an excellent organization. Evaluate yourself, your own performance. And then here's something else I just want to call out. One time I was talking to one of my managers, and I said, what do we do with the library? And she's like, you're the director and you don't know. And I said, okay, give me every statistic we have, every number we have, and just put it in order by volume. What does your library do? Largest category here, what was the number one thing that happened in our library? We check stuff out, okay? 8 million books a year, 8 million, okay? A lot. And then the second thing we do was actually people brought them back. I was like that, you send them out. And then the next two things, and again, I didn't manipulate this. I was just amazed by the beauty of this picture, is that these two things are equal. They're both about visits. It's visits to the building, and it's visits to the website. That's the second thing that people do. Usually they come to the website, they use the catalog, and the catalog they put books on hold, okay? Mostly about circulation. And then the other four things were all kind of roughly equal. Reference questions that got asked at the desk, database access, mostly students doing research for papers, story time attendance, program attendance, and use of computers in the building. And then I would say, okay, what else do we do? Say, well, volunteers are very important. True, we have 2 volunteers for every staff person, but it didn't add up to $221,000 a year. And I put this out here to say, ask that question. Board members, ask that question. Directors, do that list and present it to them and say, this is what our community is actually asking of us. This is what they want from us. This is what we do. Does our staffing match that? Second way that I've seen, it used to be I would give this list of 150 statistics that I would give to the board every month. And they would look at it and go, that went up. Is that good? That went down. Is that bad? They would say, I'm not doing a good job of giving you a context for these numbers. And I went to Keith Lance at the Library Research Service. And I said, what are the numbers that matter? And he said, just 5. He says, if you want to look at how good your library is, it comes down to 5 numbers. What is your circulation per capita? Total checkouts divided by the population you serve. Doesn't matter how big you are, right? Rural to large. That number is good. Visits per capita, how many people walk in the door divided by your total service population. And we have these door counters that come in. First time I sent them, I said, oh, this is pretty good. They said, no, you have to divide it in 2. Because they left. Third thing is logins per capita. How many people sit down to use your public PCs or catalog or website? Program attendance per capita. And the last one is staff per 1,000 served. And I thought, kind of a business background, came in and said, okay, so there's a time you got to cut your staff, right? And they said, here's what the truth is. The more staff per 1,000, the better your library performs. We're a people business, okay? And if I were to come through and I would say, describe to me what is the largest single category of your budget? Staff, right? 55 to 88% across the country. That's what you spend, okay? What is the second largest category of your spending? Don't know? Materials, that's right. And the range in there is astonishing. It goes from 1% to rarely higher than 20. And yet, what's the number one reason people walk in the building? Check stuff out. Okay? If you take those two things, let's say I'm going to get up to 80% of my budget for staff and 20% for collection, how much is left? Have you ever had a meeting where you go on and you're talking on and on about some expenditure that works out to $25? You're talking about the wrong stuff, people, right? You should be talking about what's the category of staff, how much are we doing in collections, and that's your job. Match the budget to the demand. And then the last one here is this trifecta, great little term. For a long time in library world, we could say the numbers we would judge ourselves by was input. How many square feet, how many books, how many dollars. And then we moved to outputs divided by circulation, performance measures. And now a lot of libraries are talking about outcomes. What can you do to reduce the student dropout rate in high school? What can you do to reduce the number of kids in the free lunch program? How can you make larger issues? And I don't want to say, I used to think it was like a progress, from input to output to output. But the truth is, all of them are necessary. Measure them all, look at them all. What difference are you making to your community? And then this last idea, what gets measured gets done. I used to have a branch manager who said, okay, I'm going to use a new measurement. What percentage of our collection is checked out? What percentage of your collection is in somebody's home? Right? So if you look at all the books that you own, what percentage are sitting in the library right now? What do you think? 80%? Good guess. 90? Could be. And I'm finding that the range is about 8% is out, checked out, up to about 25%. I had a manager who every day would take a look at this set of books and she would say, okay, 15% of these are checked out. How can we get them all out? And every day she would ask that question. At the end of a year, 62% of the Lone Tree Library was checked out. And guess what? A lot of your staff, your space pressures disappear. Now you have a lot of room, right? And with the room, you turn everything out so that on every shelf, there's at least 1 or 2 books that are face out. And people walk back and they go, oh, I didn't know you had that, I didn't know you had that. And then staff walks through and fills them all. If you want to make a difference, the books have to be in people's homes, not in the library, right? What gets measured gets done. If you say to your library director every time you have a meeting, how are we doing on children's program attendance? The director starts working on that. Okay? You're in charge of what happens in the library. So those are the big things we talked about. Now I'm going to race through some principles. First, understand the difference between governance and management. Your job isn't management. We don't need your help for that. We need your connection to the community. We need what you know about the environment. I can't do that as a director, but if I can say to somebody, what do you know about the schools, what's going on with traffic, what's going on with the town, the county, and you all know that we make better decisions. I had a friend of mine who says wonderful thing. He says that the board should keep its nose in. How's it going? Noticed you're losing a lot of staff lately. What's going on with that? Put your hands out. Okay? You get to ask questions. Your nose in, but don't try to manage it. Respect your fellow board members' time. Stay on task. And the best story I have about this one is my board member Luella walks in one time and she says, okay, I know it's not on the agenda, I know we're not even talking about this, but I'm really worried about interlibrary law. The problem with this one is, and my board president said, Luella, I want you to take time, put together a succinct description of the problem and your proposed solution. I'll put you on the agenda for next month, the next issue. Halfway through, he calls her and says, it's a week out. We'll be looking for your report on interlibrary loan. Luella walks in, Luella, we're on the agenda for interlibrary. Well, I didn't have time to do that, but I got a new problem. I noticed that there was something in when you're prepared to talk about this, we'll put it on the agenda. Disrespect is what that looks like. If I'm talking about something that's not on the agenda, and it's not important in the sense of urgent and strategic, I'm wasting my fellow board members' time, right? Stick to the agenda. Third one, listen to each other. Listening does not mean waiting for the other person to stop so you can speak. Wonderful research about this. What makes for an effective team? 2 things. They are open-minded to each other. They might say, James, I have never agreed with you in the 20 years we've been on the board, but surprise me. I'm going to listen. That's the first thing, open-mindedness. And the second thing is affection. Affection. Isn't that interesting? That we're a good board where we just kind of like each other. You may not see each other outside of the board, but affection is based on mutual trust. It's based on, do you listen to each other? Finally, have your say and vote your conscience. Too often it happens where you've got 2 positions. You've got a strong position, we should do this, we shouldn't do that. And you're sitting there going back and forth, and you don't really know, and so you don't really say anything, and you go with what looks like it's the majority, then why bother to be on a board? You're not helping, right? If you're on a board, you're supposed to say, I've thought about this, and I disagree violently, and by God, it ought to be like this. Because someone on the board is thinking, I've been waiting for someone to say, that's my problem. That's the problem. Speak up and vote your conscience. Now, the fifth one is what happens is like, so tell me this has never happened to you. You are the only person in the room who's right. Right? They're all wrong. They're all crazy. They made an absolutely ridiculous decision. Every one of them agreed they're all wrong. And you walk out and somebody says, so what did the board decide? You know, what did you do? What did you decide? And then you say, the board decided to do this for these reasons. You represent the board decision. Because believe it or not, your opinion, once the vote has been taken, doesn't matter. That's not a decision. The board decision. Only the board can decide. Quick story about this. One time I was getting along very poorly with my board president, and I said, I feel like we're not in sync. Can we have breakfast? We went out and were talking, and I said, my daughter is not yet in high school. My son is not yet in elementary school. Good time for me to look for another job. Should I be looking for another job? And he said, I certainly wouldn't stand in your way. Went out, started looking, found a great job in a terrible place. My wife said, I don't know. Found a wonderful place, terrible job. I didn't want to go there. And finally I went back and I said, you know, to the board, I said, Bob has indicated that I should be looking for another job. And they went, we didn't say that. And I went, oh my God, I made the most elementary director mistake. I can say to the board, what is the will of the board? And if one or two strong-voiced people or bullies say something, I then turn and say, what is the will of the board? Not the same thing. If you allow the board to be taken over by a bully, by the strongest voice, shame on you. Why are you on board? The job is to make good decisions, not to give in to the person who's strongest. Right? You're supposed to listen to each other. You're supposed to respect each other. Sometimes the director can be the bully. Right? Don't let them get away with that either. That's a performance problem. They're not the governing authority. They're supposed to be responsible for vision. So I hope this empowers every single one of you to say, you can make the board better. And it just takes one person to stand up and say, okay, I want to represent the decision of the board, and I want to make sure all of us have weighed in, that the best thinking of this group has happened. The last one, do you have anybody on your board who keeps wanting to go over the same thing you've already talked about, meeting after meeting after meeting? A good board president shuts that down. God save you from the board president who's like this. Right? But it's where, you know, and it could be the director too. They keep raising the same issue over and over. And the board president should say, is there new information? Have we learned something since the last time we talked about it? No. Next issue. And if, as it happens, and then like there's one woman, every month she raises up a book that she wants to have removed from the collection. And the board says, okay, is there new information? Yes, it's a new book. Okay, Llewellyn, you have 30 seconds. Is there a second to this motion? No. Next issue. Okay? Move it. Move it along. Don't allow yourself to be held hostage. And then this last one, and I'll wrap it up, is build by example. And this is so powerful. Believe the best of each other. You know, very few people become library board members in order to take over the world. You know? Most of the time, we're trying to just make things better, right? We're trying to help our community, we're trying to help kids, we're trying to make a better library. Assume innocence and good intentions. Sometimes you'll be surprised, but be positive going into it. Just so much easier to like each other. And the second is to hold to the big vision. The director and the staff will get caught up on the details, and we look to the trustees to say, what's the stuff that matters again? Your long-range plan should have 3 bullet points. Keep talking about it. What gets measured gets done. Hold to the big stuff. And then the last one is that recognize that when a board goes bad, When a director goes bad, the reputation of your institution spreads internationally. I'm here to tell you, library directors in the room, can you raise your hand? Okay? We talk to each other every night. Every night. Okay? It's on Twitter, it's on Facebook. There are ways that we talk to each other that are so secret I can't tell you. But the reputation of your library flies across the country. A director can run it, unless the board steps in, and then the reputation goes out and say, yeah, that director was screwy. We kind of knew that, but the board cleaned it up. Or we say, don't apply for that job. The board is crazy. Right? And so I want to assert this, is that be your best self, and you have a choice. You can be your best self. You can show up at a meeting and say, I'm a good communicator. We listen to each other. We talked about the stuff that matters. We've asked you to report on the stuff that we think is significant. And that's what a good board does. You don't often hear this. Thank you. Thank you. Because libraries, public libraries in the United States are the most trusted. In fact, I saw this wonderful Pew report. They went back and asked 10,000 community leaders, which do you like better, apple pie or libraries? Libraries won! They like us better than apple pie. And why is that? It's because you're in charge. It's because you are running a good public institution that does good in our organization, or in our whole society. So, I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, and I won't keep you here, if you have comments, I'm happy to take them. But please, feel free. If something comes up, you want to talk about something, want to think about something, that's my email. Thank you.